Hello, my name is Tony Breitbach from St. Louis University. I am Deputy Chair of the Board for Interprofessional Global, and I welcome you to today's Global Cafe. Today's speaker is Dr. Teresa Stevens. I will be introducing her in just a minute. A few housekeeping issues. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will be monitoring it and encourage you to do that. Also, if you get the chance, put your name and your home institution and country into the chat so we get a sense of who's all here. This is being recorded, and we will be posting it to both YouTube and our website within about a week or so, usually by the time we get it edited. So it will be available for sharing. So if you have colleagues that you would like to enjoy this presentation but couldn't make it this morning, there will be that opportunity to view that. So let's see. Tese, do you want to turn your video on? Let's see. There we go. Okay, hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, and then I'll kind of pop out and let you take over. Okay.
Sounds great.
So Dr. Teresa T. Stevens is a nurse leader, educator, researcher, consultant with over 37 years of experience in both practice and academic settings. She has devoted much of her career to radically transforming the culture of nursing, advocating for compassionate courage, and positively disrupting the status quo. She is author of the Stevens Model of Resilience and founder of RN PREP, meaning Personal Resilience Enhancement Plan. Her research is focused on resilience, specifically as a tool to promote well-being and professional fulfillment in nurses, nursing students, and interprofessional teams. Much of this work is built on the narratives of Holocaust survivors. Tese enjoys helping organizations build resilient teams to embrace collective efficacy and to eradicate the systemic issues leading to moral distress and burnout. She is a certified nurse educator and serves as a peer reviewer for Accreditation Commission on Education and Nursing, as an advisory member for the Coalition of Nurse Wellbeing and the South Carolina Hospital Association's Workforce Development, as an active member of the Relational Coordination Collaborative. She currently serves as Associate Dean for Academics at the Medical University of South Carolina's College of Nursing. I will let you take over. So welcome, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks so much, Tony. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have been a part of interprofessional education for quite a while, and it is one of my favorite things, and it really aligns very well with my research and my work in personal resilience. And I'll give you just a brief backstory before we get into the slides. So quite a few years ago, I was doing the initial part of my research in personal resilience and developing the RN Prep program that he mentioned, and working through how do we teach resilience, and doing some studies around that, and really all of this work leading into a resilient mindset and understanding what that is and how do we actually translate that into action to where we can teach it to our health profession students. At the same time, I was working with an organization very intensively in IPE. We were an incubator site for the Nexus organization, and we were creating a curriculum for health sciences students at a large academic health sciences center. And it was one of my favorite jobs of all time. I think there are a couple of people attending here that are still a part of that team. And as I was thinking about how much joy and fulfillment I got from that work, it just became very readily apparent to me that there were very strong connections between what I was learning and teaching about personal resilience and the evidence around resilient teams. What really makes a good team? What makes us effective? And they were so closely aligned that it became another separate part of this work. And as things have evolved and the burnout crisis has worsened, and a lot of my research now is in moral injury, moral distress with nurses and other clinicians, the need for this is even greater. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I discovered the concept of pedagogical wellness a couple of years ago, and it was a true aha moment for me. I could see its application within individual colleges, within the health professions, but most importantly, everything that we know about changing the culture of healthcare in both practice and academic settings calls for collective action. So that's where we're going to focus today. And I am open to questions, comments. My email address is at the bottom, and I'm happy to engage on a one-on-one if you're interested in that. So let me move through these slides. So I use AHA slides, and because of the time limit today, we won't have a lot of interaction, but you can scan this QR code, and it does offer a chance to engage if you would like to during the presentation. And that's emojis. You can put in some comments, things like that, but it also allows you to follow along on a mobile device if you want to be mobile during the presentation. So this will stay at the top of the slides for a while. And I can see that many of you have already joined. I see the little head count at the bottom, but it's not necessary. We will not be doing a lot of interactions today. Thumbs up. Thank you. I always appreciate the thumbs ups and the smiles. You can cry if you want to too. Some of the slides might cause you to feel a little sad, but this is a very positive, hopeful presentation. I hope you feel it that way. So what is pedagogical wellness? As I said, I discovered this a couple of years ago, and there's very limited application currently. It's very new on the scene. And my PhD is in nursing education, so I'm very in the weeds and in the research around pedagogy and andragogy and best practices in teaching and learning. And they go hand in hand with creating nurturing, psychologically safe, successful environments for the learning. But pedagogical wellness is the intersection of what we do for both faculty and for learners. And I like this definition here. It's the practice of integrating evidence-based teaching and wellness strategies into the educational space to promote both student and faculty well-being and success. So it's the combination of wellness, well-being initiatives and good evidence-based teaching and learning practices. And they go hand in hand. It fosters space for creating a new type of culture in academia, one that is based on mutual care, trust, respect, and compassion among the entire environment, the academic environment. So that includes our faculty and the learners. So we're addressing both sides of this and the needs of both key stakeholders in the academic setting. Why do we need it? Why is it important? Well, there are alarming rates of burnout and moral distress. Now we're talking more about moral injury in the practice setting, but it's also in academia. And it has been named a public health crisis, and we've not done a good job in addressing this. We'll talk a little bit more about the statistics around that. But we know that there are increasing numbers of faculty and learners that are reporting depression, moral distress, and other health effects from chronic workplace stress. And when we talk about chronic workplace stress, that includes the academic environment for the learners. So we're cataloging all that together under the term chronic workplace stress. There's a growing body of evidence that shows these problems are increasing, not improving, even since the World Health Organization named this an occupational phenomenon in 2019. And we've had more and more organizations and leading authorities recommend we do things to address the systemic issues that lead to this. The data shows it's not getting any better. We have to find another solution. We have to find something that we can do to truly transform our cultures. And that's where we are. There are many urgent calls going out for a radical transformation of the systems that we work and learn within. But how do we do that? We've not shown a lot of promise in the initiatives that we've had thus far. So just a reminder about what happened in May 2019. This was a year before the pandemic hit. So that's significant because we had already reached a crisis level for burnout in clinicians at that point. The pandemic was not the beginning. We were already at a bad place. The pandemic just escalated it and caused a surge in the awareness and the recognition beyond our professions. So it's when the world became aware of the burnout crisis in clinicians and healthcare professionals. Chronic workplace stress is another relatively new term that has evolved since all of this, because once we recognized burnout as a problem, and there were many calls for research in this area, specifically to address it. So identifying the root causes, and then what do we do about it? As you know, when we do research, we ask more and more questions, and it just takes us down these rabbit holes where we learn more and more and more. And we just continue to learn and build this body of evidence around this. That's where chronic workplace stress came in. Prior to this, we were just classifying it as stress and work-related stress, an occupational phenomenon. But now we've dug deeper into this evidence and done more research around this, and we recognize that chronic workplace stress looks different than the normal everyday stressors that we have. This is why it requires a different approach to addressing them. But based on our research, mine and many other people's research, these are the most frequently cited causes of chronic workplace stress in nurses and other healthcare professionals. Workload, increasingly heavy workload, job demands, asking people to do more with less. Inefficient processes and workflows. They just don't work. There's a lot of things that are in there that need to be removed or they need to be revised, but they cause administrative burden. So this is one of the top complaints as well. Poor communication, which is an essential part of IPE, really working on how do we clearly and effectively communicate with each other. Another big thing that we found that leads to chronic workplace stress are unclear or miscommunicated expectations. This goes back to cultural norms where people assume wrongly that everyone understands this, but there's no way to really verify that it's been communicated effectively, translated to where everyone could have access to that information in a way that is understandable. But these assumptions are made, and it leads to a lot of perceived failures, errors, and other things that just completely go back to poor communication. For a big one for healthcare professionals is misinterpreted or overly rigid regulatory requirements. And I see this all the time as a consultant and a site reviewer for accreditation. And in my own work environment, people again make assumptions. Well, I thought that's what we were supposed to do, or it's personal preference that's added in on top of a regulatory requirement. That leads to additional chronic workplace stress. Leadership is a big topic. What we know about leadership today and what is needed and recommended in health professions is vastly different from what we used to believe was right. Yet we still have the tendency to hire and promote based on those old criteria. And this is really an area where we have been charged with radically transforming to make sure that its values fit and that they demonstrate true leadership behaviors, not necessarily command and control or authoritative type leadership. Then that goes hand in hand with the next bullet point of competing or conflicting values. And this is really something that's coming out in the literature now, and I've had it discovered in my own research with nursing faculty. the conflicting values or competing values between those that are doing the work and those in the C-suite or at the administrative level, coming from two different perspectives on what is valued most. And this leads to a lot of chronic workplace stress, lack of autonomy and control, and then again, moral distress. The goal that we hope to achieve and want to see for all of ourselves and our team members and our students who are coming into the profession is professional quality of life. And this is very simply what you feel about your work and the level of quality that you feel related to your work. And we measure this, and it's influenced by both the positive and negative aspects of your job. That seems very simple, that we want that. I think everyone would agree we want professional quality of life. We've been championing this cause for years now. So why haven't we gotten there? What is our roadblock? What are the barriers that are keeping us from achieving these goals? There's a lot of research out there that explains that to us. My most recent study was with 690 nursing faculty across the US, and we were looking in this study at the relationships between resilience, a sense of purpose or meaning in work, and moral courage. So it was a mixed method study. And the first part of the study, the quantitative part, showed that there was a significant relationship between all three concepts. Excuse me. We also had a qualitative component that we are still finalizing that analysis. And it was extremely revealing about the true nature of what these problems are and these pain points. What we learned is that there is a large need for a radical transformation of the academic culture for nurses. This is consistent with what we're finding in the other health professions as well. Two big things came out of this, excuse me, that will lead to this transformation. Excuse me. We need an ethical, moral leadership and resilient teams. Excuse me, 1 minute, I'm going to take a drink of water. Excuse me, sorry. Most of our professions have ethical codes. And in IPE, we talk about ethics and values. But it has to become more than just words. We have to really make sure that our behaviors, our actions, our decisions as organizations and as individuals align with our values. And this is where our ethics come into play. We've learned that moral courage, the ability to stand up and speak out about things that are harmful or unjust or non-evidence-based, is a component of all of our ethical codes. However, in healthcare, it often comes with personal risk. And it is something that we have learned we cannot expect of everyone due to some of the cultures that people work within. We've also learned that cultures where hierarchy is supreme and it's more of a top-down approach.
Do you want to mute your video real quick and just take a second?
I've been battling this cough for a few weeks, but we know it's a risk. And so in the absence of perfect leaders, which no one has, we're all human, we need resilient teams to address this issue. And this is where pedagogical wellness and interprofessional teams are such a perfect match. This is the model of professional quality of life. And you can see here, this is when it's operationalized. There are three main categories. The two in the yellow are the positives, the things we want to maximize: perceived support and compassion satisfaction. The red is what we want to minimize as much as possible to mitigate the risk of having a low professional quality of life. That is compassion fatigue, and it is made up of the components of burnout, secondary traumatic stress, and moral distress. One of the things that has blocked us in healthcare professions and in practice is what Clara Barton, who was the founder of the American Red Cross, called the tyranny of precedent. And I wrote about this in a leadership article in 2020. And I've thought a lot about it ever since then, how precedent really does block us, serve as a huge barrier to radically transforming. It's a barrier to even small change within the healthcare environment. But there's many reasons for this, but we are tied to precedent many times, and it does act as a tyrant in our efforts to promote positive disruption and to achieve those goals that we so desperately need to achieve. I like to call the power of resilient teams the boulder, moving the boulder in the road. And I compare it to personal resilience, which is the pebble in the shoe. If I'm taking my daily walk and I feel there's a little pebble in my shoe, I just stop and take care of that. That's self-efficacy. And then I go on. That's where personal resilience, that's the side on personal. However, when we have many challenges and there's personal risk involved in being the lone voice standing up and speaking out and challenging the status quo, we need collective efficacy, which is how we move those boulders in the road. You can see this person here trying to move uphill a very large boulder. This person's not going to be successful, most likely, and will probably get hurt in the process. So while we encourage moral courage and we strive to build that, it's better if we could all come together to move these boulders to achieve the goals that have been set for us and that are being recommended globally to transform healthcare. I don't know who said this, but it's become one of my favorite quotes. Systems change when the people within them change. And you can take that to one of two ways. It happens on both sides of the coin. When people change their own behaviors and mindsets, their attitudes about things, we actually change our mind. And that's where we eliminate our biases, our blind spots, our preferences, those things that serve as tyrants, those precedential type things. We change ourselves and we change our behaviors as a result of that. The other side of that, and a physician friend actually made this clear to me, is that systems change when the people within them actually change. Leaders change. You get new leadership in or new people in that possess the mindsets and the skills that are needed to transform. So there's two ways that we can make systems change, but systems will never change until the people that are within them have the right mindsets and skill sets, the right people in the right seats at the right time. So moving forward, we want moral courage, and it's required to challenge the status quo and to move healthcare forward, especially when addressing the crisis of burnout and moral injury. Two of the things that I've found in my research and many others, if you read Wendy Dean's work with physicians on moral injury, we know we have to have ethical leadership, people who live the values. And we desperately need resilient teams to move this forward and move the boulders out of the road, to collectively come together and make this happen. So pedagogical wellness in interprofessional education is my idea of a solution to radically and purposefully transform the academic experience through collective efficacy, to promote enhanced professional quality of life for both faculty and the learners. So you probably are very familiar with Bandura's definition of self-efficacy, and I use both definitions. Again, self-efficacy is very prominent in personal resilience. Collective efficacy is the leading force in resilient teams. But it's our shared belief in our capability together to organize and execute courses of action required to produce given levels of attainment. So our goal is to transform healthcare and transform the academic experience for both the faculty and the learners to promote quality of life and minimize the risk of burnout and moral distress. We know we cannot do that alone. And these individual efforts that we're all working to do are ripples. But what we need are major effort. We are losing time. The crisis is building, and we must come together to do this effectively, to really transform our cultures. So here are some of the things, and this is just very quick overview of some of the things that would be involved in adapting pedagogical wellness into the academic health sciences. Currently, there are 2 leading places in the United States that have established centers or departments around pedagogical wellness. Neither are in the academic health sciences world. One is UC Irvine, and they really kind of were leading in this frontier. And then North Carolina State in Raleigh, North Carolina. They both have really taken this concept and expanded it. And I'll share their websites with you in just a moment, but to really give us a framework to work around. And all of these are intricately aligned with the 4 competencies of interprofessional education: teams and teamwork, values and ethics, roles and responsibilities, and communication. So what I would love to see us doing as an IPE community or an IP community is thinking about how do we incorporate pedagogical wellness on a larger, broader scale to really move this forward to where we're teaching and modeling shared values-based decision-making. So they have to go hand in hand. We can't just teach it, we have to model it. Ethical leadership, accountability for ourselves and our decisions, evidence-based teaching and learning practices, purposeful imprinting. That's one of my new favorite terms. I've been really looking at purposeful imprinting for a couple of years. Give me a hands up or a thumbs up if you're familiar with that term. Nobody familiar with it. Okay. So you probably have heard about imprinting from the biological sciences. And if you've ever lived on a farm, you've seen it in action with ducks, geese, goats, other animals. The imprinting is the where the first thing you see or your first exposure to something greatly impacts your behaviors. And this has become a huge area of focus in medical education, and I'm adapting it into nursing education as well, where we know now, based on the research that's been done, the preliminary work, is that our learners are imprinted very heavily on their first exposures to all of these concepts. And this is why we often see people carrying those through. And we've wondered why some of these cycles aren't broken. And it's going directly back to this imprinting. So Dr. Bob Phillips with the Family Medicine Group has done some work around this, he and his colleagues, looking at purposeful imprinting in healthcare education to where we're very intentional that those first exposures are with people and with systems and experiences that promote the values and behaviors we want to see. So it's a fascinating concept. It's a growing body of research. The other things we have to look at within this pedagogical wellness sphere are our policies and processes. are they evidence-based, or are they simply held over from previous generations that weren't based on the evidence? We have to look at innovating our programs. We have to look at faculty development and making sure they are receiving the training and support and education they need to understand this and to change their own practices and behaviors. So here's just some examples of some of the pedagogical wellness tactics that these other two programs are using. Now, again, these are not academic health sciences centers, but these are very broad and general approaches to changing the culture and integrating some of these strategies that can easily be translated into interprofessional education. So on the faculty side, looking at smart course design, and I'll show you examples of what these each look like. Consistent and effective communication strategies. And this is very much aligned with our IPE competencies, just really looking at those effective communication strategies. And what does that look like? How do we clearly communicate and effectively communicate, and bringing that into our own academic cultures, not just teaching it as IPE, but teaching it as a way of living and working. Building personal support networks. That's one of the things I've found that's most important on a personal resilience side for both faculty and learners, is that you have a strong support network. It doesn't have to be a big network, but you have to know that there's someone there for you that is that you can go to. And this is very true for academic health sciences faculty. And then the ability to set healthy boundaries, not just set them, but make sure that they are carried out. And sadly, this is a competency or a skill that many struggle with. I struggled with it for years, and a lot of this is culturally related. But we really have to learn to set boundaries, model the carrying out of these boundaries, upholding these boundaries, and then teaching our learners how to set boundaries themselves while they're students before they get into the work environment. Pedagogical wellness tactics for learners include really thinking about the syllabus in a different way. And, you know, there's a lot of jokes around the syllabus. In fact, I once had a shirt that said it's in the syllabus. But it really thinking about why do we have a syllabus? What's the purpose of that? And how can we improve that to where it is an effective tool? And a liquid syllabus is one example of what both of these programs are advocating for. And I'll show you what that is in a minute. Rethinking assessments and assignments to where they align with best practices in teaching and learning, especially if you're in online learning environment. And then we look at the culture and environment. How do we promote and build a healthy culture for our learners where they can thrive, meet their goals, still have excellent educational experiences, and be very successful on that end, but reduce some of the chronic stress that they're experiencing? And it's doable. We can do that. And then, of course, communication is another big part of that. And I just put the two schools here as superstars in this area, and we'll look at those in just one moment. But I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes by Satoru. Individually, we are one drop. Together, we are an ocean. Mother Teresa is another quote that I often rely on. And she said, I alone cannot change the world, but I can create ripples. And I think that is what we're saying collectively in this area. We're all aiming for this, or most of us are aiming for this. And we are working very hard. Let's come together and figure out a way through interprofessional education that we can do this. I see the greatest hope for transformation of academia and practice through collective efficacy. I believe it's true. I've seen it happen. And I also know that it brings great joy and fulfillment to those of us who have this shared purpose, this shared mindset around that, to be with others who are working toward the same thing. And we can really increase our impact through this collective effort. One last quote. I'm kind of a nerd in that way. I love quotes. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So there's my email address, and I'm going to go ahead and share those other two websites with you really quickly before we go and have some questions, okay? So this is North Carolina State University, and it's just down the road from where I am today. And they have an excellent website on pedagogical wellness. They adapted their program department from UC Irvine's. This, again, I want to reiterate, is where we have great opportunity. I, as IPE colleagues, it has not been done yet in the academic health sciences. And I envision a think tank, a collective committee, something around that area. I don't know. That's why I'm here today. But I believe there's a lot of power in this, and I believe it's very much needed. So the way they have their website organized is you can go to faculty and student pedagogical wellness. So let me just show you briefly what is available here. I talked about course design. So they talk about managing grading deadlines, being flexible, not so rigid. You probably have heard of toxic rigor, but really looking at the evidence and the best practices around this. What does the evidence say about grading strategies? And then combine that with what we know about time management. My mantra is work smarter, not harder. And that's what I tell my team. And really looking at ways that we can consolidate and don't make assumptions, clarify expectations, and then build your calendar around that. Create assignments that require less grading time. Break up large project assignments. Use technology. One of our strategic goals is to leverage the technology we have in order to work smarter, not harder. Resources, course policies. This goes back to being flexible and adaptable. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see if you go to ncsu.edu, and then, or you can just Google pedagogical wellness. You can see all of these. They have links to some of these things, like there's an attendance policy that has built-in flexibility. I have used this myself and find it hugely successful. Here's some information about how do you use your syllabus effectively to communicate. And an example of the liquid syllabus. This is kind of like a website where you update things on an ongoing basis about yourself. It's much more personal in nature. You can give talks to your students that boost morale, or you can pop in and share something. Just, it's about creating a sense of community and a sense of belonging in not so much of a dry format as a syllabus. It's called a liquid syllabus. And it also helps to reduce their anxiety. It makes you more human to them, and creates that sense of support as well. And then there's some other things in here about support. Let's look at UC Irvine's. And again, they were kind of like the gold standard. They initiated this. They're the ones that I first heard about pedagogical wellness, and they have really been the pioneers in this area. You can go to their website and find this there as well. And theirs is very similarly arranged as NC State. So here for students, and again, same type of concepts: revising how you do your syllabus, assessment and grading style. What type of assessments do you use, and assignments, class environment participation, and then how do you communicate with students? What do you communicate with students? And then when we look at the faculty, again, it's the same thing: your course design, your policies, and these are all based on the cognitive science world. And when we think about best practices in teaching, learning, and reflective practice, retrieval practice, all of these things that are built around higher level thinking skills and retention, we know we have to reduce cognitive load and create environments where people can learn and retain that. And all of these are based on cognitive science. So that's what I have there. And then I just also wanted to remind you, about the website for the IPEC core competencies, version 3. If you want to look at more at how these are aligned with those 4 competencies, they really are amazingly similar, and they go hand in hand. And to me, it just makes perfect sense that we combine pedagogical wellness with our IPEC core competencies. So that's all that I have, and I want to open this up for any questions now, or turn it back over to Tony and let him lead from this point on.
No, I think once again, thank you very much for an outstanding, important presentation on a very important topic. I actually worked on the group that did revise the IPEC competencies, and wellness and well-being. It was absolutely, based on the feedback we've heard from town halls and in the literature, was an absolute focus area for us. When with cultural humility, all of those types of things like that. So the other thing, when we put together the new competencies, was really, we focus at there's and I like how you reference North Carolina State and those kind of things, because there's a science already existing in the area. We do not have to invent it. We don't have to invent. I think sometimes when we teach interprofessional education, we feel like we're inventing this new science of, no, all we're doing is we're taking known science in other areas and we're applying it to this unique context of health professions education and those types of things like that. And I think that's one of the things we tried to realize in the new competencies is like pull in those concepts from other areas and apply them within your setting, healthcare and health professions education. So very good. So any questions? Do we have any questions? You can feel free to put your hand up, or if you want to ask it personally, or if you want to put it in the chat, whatever you're more comfortable with, please feel free to ask questions. So I'll ask one real quick. As far as what kind of experience do you have implementing interventions, whether it be in academic settings or care settings, those types of things? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Specific to resilient teams, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of it has been around, I have this 4-step program built on the 4 Ps, and the RN prep course that you talked about is the personal resilience side of that. And then I've translated that to a resilient teams. And we've had great success in that. I've done workshops with groups, and then I've worked with individual groups as a consultant. And it's based on my model of resilience that is the 4 Ps: purpose, priorities, perspective, and personal responsibility. And we talk about really breaking down and looking at what are the failures of teams, what really causes teams to not be successful, and looking at that and then flipping that. So a lot of that comes from Lenciani's work, Adam Grant's work, a lot of these leaders in looking at teamwork. So a shared mindset and a shared purpose, and naming that, because we often find that many teams who are working together, until you get that out there and you really talk about, why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? There's different ideas going on in everyone's mind. And so just clarifying that, setting that out there, creating a charter around that, and then reminding people of that, and putting in what I call forcing functions. It's based on nudge theory, but really putting these things into your policies and processes so that it doesn't fall through the cracks and you don't go back to old habits. So one is reminding everyone of your purpose at every chance. And that the second thing are your priorities. That's your values. So what are the core values that we espouse? And then also looking at what are our primary goals. What are we wanting to accomplish, short-term and long-term? And making sure we align our behaviors and our actions and our decisions with those 2 things, what we want to accomplish and our values. Building in forcing functions with that. So checks and balances. We make a decision, or we bring something up. We check it back. Is this consistent with our values? If not, what is our rationale for doing it? And so just going back to those things, and then the personal responsibility is being accountable. And this is where a charter comes into place. What do we expect of each other? And everyone has a discussion about that. How do we hold ourselves accountable? I'm sorry, the third one was perspective. And that's the biggest part that comes with teams, that I think, and that is an informed perspective, making sure that we have diverse leaders on our teams and diverse voices on our teams, people that are heard and respected and trusted, that bring a unique skill set. So thinking about fit, not conformity. So we want people that are diverse and think differently, to make sure our perspective is broad, and that we don't get into that where we're just maintaining status quo all the time and everyone just agrees with everyone, that groupthink kind of problem. And then the personal responsibility was the last one, where I talked about where we're all accountable to ourselves and to each other. And one of the things that I've found most effective with groups is when they get through this process and build a charter for that team or that committee or whatever it is, and they use that, they see a great transformation in how they work together.
That's great. You know, I think one of the, you know, when I teach learners in interprofessional education, one of the hardest things they have to do is that kind of holding each other accountable, that shared accountability piece. We do, all of our teams do a team contract at the beginning of the semester, where they talk about, you know, how are we going to deal with somebody that's a slacker, to be honest with you. You know, and sometimes it's like they look around the table, they're like, none of us are going to be slackers. I'm like, okay, there's no slackers in academics at all.
Yeah,
But then it ends up being good in the long run, because then they have a strategy for assessing those kind of things. So Lisa Langdale has a question.
I know
Lisa, do you
Lisa.
want to turn your video on, or are you just going to ask it audio?
Lisa's a friend and colleague.
Okay, great. There, let me
Good
hear it. Let's
morning.
do this. There we go. Good. I got you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Tese. How are you?
Morning.
Thank you for this great conversation this morning. And I have a comment and then sort of a question. So, part of the work we have been doing is taking those revised IPEC competencies and kind of mapping out where in our curriculums we are addressing all of those competencies. And I think we have some gaps, and maybe some of the strategies that you've talked about today and the information will help us close those gaps in our education. But one thing I wondered when you talked about purposeful imprinting, and I'm very curious about that subject, and we do our initial coursework on interprofessionalism and working collaboratively in practice together. uh, how can we make sure that we're purposefully imprinting during those courses, what that looks like? And is that partly reflective in the clinical spaces that we put our students in when they go there? And some of our programs, we don't have a lot of choice about where our students go. There's such competition for clinical space. So, do you have suggestions or thoughts about how we can balance that in coursework and also what they're seeing in reality in that clinical space when they go out into um, our our clinical settings, I guess?
Absolutely. That's a very common real world problem in this, and it's often a barrier to doing this effectively. And so the one thing we cannot do is ignore that there are both good and bad imprinting that is occurring, and with our learners. And so what we have to do with when I say purposeful imprinting, is that we purposefully target and make sure that those people who embody the values and the behaviors, that they are front and center from day one, and that learners are exposed to them on a regular basis, and that we are consistently sending the message: these are our values as professionals, these are what we want to see. You may not see that all the time, but what you need to do is know this is what we expect. You know, we're all human, and like Tony said, we all make mistakes, and these things are going to happen, and we have to look at things reasonably that way, and guide them, because otherwise what we have found, especially with nurses, is that they may be in a culture where the majority are not acting the way, or they may be exposed for a limited amount of time to a group where that's a cultural norm, the bad behaviors. And we want to make it very clear that it's the world. People are imperfect, but what we strive for is this. And just make sure they're exposed to that and they see it in action. They don't just read about it or hear it, but they actually have a chance to interact with those people. So it's being very intentional of who's teaching those courses and who's part of those experiences, even if they're not assigned full time, but that at least they have that exposure and can see that it is possible to be successful and to do these things and be values aligned. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, the great question. There's a couple comments in the chat, and one of them is a comment about kind of changing the terminology around things as pedagogical wellness instead of kind of sometimes resilience comes with a judgment, per se. And then another person from McGill University was talking about how they're using student-led Schwartz rounds and developing these concepts. So I don't know if you'd like to comment, or someone or Cynthia or Amelia would like to comment also, and also Kelly Fox made some comments also regarding that. So.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm biased, I have to say, about the term resilience. It has been weaponized a bit, and I think that a lot of the harm that has been done is that it's been miscommunicated and misrepresented about what it really is. Resilience is essentially, the way I define it through my own research, is the ability to learn and grow through adversity and stress. And it's an option, it's a choice. We can't force it on anyone. But it's not a Band-Aid. It is not a fix or an excuse to not address the systemic issues. And I think that's where the backlash has come from, is that it was used and people perceived it, especially in healthcare, as a way of avoiding addressing these systemic issues that needed to be changed. What we know is that they go hand in hand, and I just blanked on his name. I'm so sorry. I cannot believe I can't remember his name, but he talks about the 10%. And when we talk about these issues with burnout and moral distress, 90% of that, an estimate, are the systemic issues that we have to change. 10% is ourselves. And that's the personal resilience, where we think about, what can I do myself to get through this better? What are the choices I need to make? So my latest studies with students, and we've done several with CRNAs, PAs, nursing students, different groups of students, we found that through the interventions to increase resilience, the self-efficacy is what has gone sky high. So the ability to reclaim your own life. And burnout often feels like a loss of control over your choices. And so that's what we wanted to see, is that stress went down when they realized they had some control. And that's what resilience is, really. Anything that's student-led, I know is effective, or almost always is effective. I'm always trying to get students to take ownership and to be a part of this, to recognize that they can lead these efforts themselves. They don't have to be given permission to talk about this and be the change that they want to see right now. And they don't have to wait until they have an official leadership title.
Great. Let's see. Also, Tricia Thomas commented on, really liked about teaching student boundaries. I think, we must not only learn it, but we also should model it, right? I think, I hear that from our students all the time, that you're teaching us how to be interprofessional, but you as instructors are just taking turns teaching, right?
Yeah.
So I think, we have to hold ourselves accountable when it comes to those kind of things too. So that's great.
And that's where the collective efficacy comes into play, I think, really. And we've done a lot of this with our own team, is just really talking about what are the expectations around email, around availability, and really thinking about what clarifying expectations. And we find oftentimes, and I've worked with teams all over the US, there are a lot of assumptions that aren't really founded. It's word of mouth or rumors or whatever. Well, I thought I had to, blah, blah, blah. Or I thought, no. Let's clarify these and just get that out there, and let's have an understanding. If you want to go outside these boundaries, that's your choice, but you're not going to expect it of everybody else. And then we have to model that for our learners too, because they need to, one, learn to respect boundaries, but also set their own. And the best way to teach them that is to do it. And to model that. So I have an email statement, about how I check email and that I work strange hours and, those types of things that I clearly define expectations around that.
Yeah. How many of us have gotten an email at 9:30 on a Sunday night and the students are like, you never respond to my emails? I'm like, I was in bed.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, right. We are human, and that's one thing I tell we welcome our students at the beginning of the semester is, we're humans. So that's the clearly defining expectations. There is letting the students know I will answer email Monday through Friday within 24 hours. I don't check email on the weekend. If it's an emergency, this is how you can reach me, blah, blah, blah. However you and your team want to set that up.
No, that's great. So, I think this is about it. If you want to make any more, kind of one last comment here, Tese, you're welcome to, and then otherwise we'll wrap it up. I want to remind one real quick second. I want to remind everybody that this recording will be posted on Interprofessional.global's YouTube site and on our website. So if you want to share it with somebody that may not be able to make it this morning, it'll probably be available in about a week. So I'll let you go there. Do you have anything you want to say?
One last thing, just thank you so much. Thank you for being patient with me with my coughing fit there. And let's not just drop it here. Let's continue thinking about how do we move this forward, and how do we make pedagogical wellness an essential part of interprofessional education. I would love to hear your thoughts and see how we can do that collectively.
Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Everyone have a wonderful holiday. Really enjoy your time with your family, refill your tank, all of those types of things like that. So absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
You.
Yeah.